Hello, we're going to talk about 10.2 today, humanistic psychology. The question is basically how humanists approach the study of personality in comparison to what we've looked at so far, which were the psychoanalysts. This one won't take too long, just really two major concepts, two psychologists that we need to look at. One of them we've talked about a decent amount already, and that is, of course, Abraham Maslow. And then we'll also look at this adorable old guy, Carl Rogers. So, the humanistic approach is kind of feel good psychology. It's often seen as the birth of what we now see as positive psychology. This psychology that focuses on self worth, self acceptance, and has stemmed one of the most lucrative fields of psychology writing and books, because who doesn't want to read a book about how to better love themselves and love others and feel good about themselves and find happiness? And that's all stemming back to humanistic psychology. So the goal is that this belief that people are good and that they want to be their best, and that what we should do is we should focus on understanding ourselves, our own needs, our own goals, and then we can worry about others, right? It's an understanding of the self first that then projects outward onto others, right? If you've ever heard like you can't love someone until you love yourself, that comes from humanistic psychology. So let's start with the OG himself, Abraham Maslow, who gives us this hierarchy of needs. This is something that you have likely all seen before. We have talked about it multiple times. And this is something that schools, I think, are really starting to realize the importance of. They've often talked about them, but schools so often have been stuck on more like Bloom's taxonomy, which often talks about let's work kids through understanding into recall, multiple choice skills, and then eventually into short answer skills, beyond recognition, into eventually synthesis and like the ability to create new content and be artistic with it. And like that stuff's well and good, but like all of that stuff is right here. Right, those things are happening all within like esteem and self-actualization, and what schools are now really starting to talk about, it's going to take a while, I think, for this to be implemented, is that we need to worry about these first. Right? We should be focusing on all of our students and asking them the question first: do you feel safe? Right? Are your physiological needs met? What can we do to get you the basics first? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs are that triangle starting at the bottom with our kind of evolutionary base needs. You can think about this going into the brain as well. Think about that hindbrain. The brain stem is no different than a frog, right? A frog has the same brain stem that we do. Evolutionary needs, this basic old brain that tells us we need food, we need water, we need to be warm, we need to keep our body temperature normal, we need sleep. It gives us our basic needs. We then work our way up to things like safety. We're basically removing anxieties and stress. Right? Are we constantly under attack by a lion? Or even if it's like maybe you worried about someone, a bully? Are you worried about someone that lives down the street that you think is dangerous? Are you worried about someone or a group of people in your neighborhood that you're afraid of? This can be older kids or as an adult, even things like gangs or large groups or individuals or really anyone that you are afraid of, and that this can take away from our feelings of safety. And if you don't feel safe, then it's hard for us to move up into these next steps. So next steps of belonging, love, needs. This is, I think, in a big way where schools can play a big role, and what I'd like to see schools focus more on, which is giving students that feeling of acceptance, that feeling of belonging somewhere. It's something that I really try to focus on in the classroom, getting you all to talk to each other, feeling comfortable with your group, having as many seminars as possible, like getting you all to talk to each other and form these relationships. Because think about like the ability you have to talk with your best friend, or with somebody that you're very, very close with, or a parent. If you're close with someone, if you have that intimate, close relationship, you feel very open. You feel safe. That is a kind of emotional safety that you feel good talking about. And so when you feel that way, when you don't feel that someone's going to judge you for your opinion, you're much more likely to be open and to share and to give your true opinion on things. And a lot of most science says that's where we start to learn. When we feel safe, when we feel that we have this belonging in this group of people, then we can then open up and others will open up, and that leads to learning, moving up into that esteem. That next stage is still kind of a psychological or emotional need of feeling smart, right? Feeling that your achievements are successful, that you are successful in some way. So finding some form of accomplishments. And then once we have those basic needs, once we feel competent, if we meet our own self-esteem needs, we then move into Maslow's ultimate goal of self-actualization. This is the biggie. If you know nothing else, know that he was gearing us towards self-actualization. These are our fulfillment needs. This is potential, often what it's referred to as. It's that our goal in life is to move towards our potential, right? And to do that, we can't immediately start working on our potential. We can't, it's difficult for someone that is homeless to say, all right, today I'm going to be my best self and I am going to achieve my ultimate potential, right? They've got to think, I've got to find food. Food's first, right? I got to find somewhere to sleep tonight. That's first. They can't think, I'm going to learn how to write code. I'm going to figure out how to speak a different language. I'm going to figure out how, we can't do any of those things that we often think of as our potential, right? Or at least our academic potential, if we're focused on finding food, finding water, finding safety, or finding belonging. If we don't feel that we are in a safe emotional space, if people around us don't accept us for who we are, it's really hard for us to get to and think about achieving our potential. Um, so self-actualization is the biggie for Maslow. Definitely focus on this one. This is that ongoing long time goal. We can achieve this in our life. Another one for him, a biggie, and this kind of he pops in later in life, in the final decade of his life. Maslow says life isn't just about achieving your own potential; it's about serving others. So he believed that self-actualization was big, and then he added another step to the triangle, and saying we actually now have another one called self-transcendence. This is going beyond the self. Self-actualization, you're like, I found my potential. I've maximized my potential. Now what? All right, now what? And you can look at people like a lot of our Fortune 500 companies. Just as an example, think about somebody like Mark Zuckerberg. Questionable usages of data and may or may not be above the law, but he's somebody that likely feels he has kind of reached his self-actualization. And what they focused on after that, Zuckerberg, somebody like Bill Gates, they form these foundations. Right? They then begin using their wealth to make a difference. Right? They are no longer just trying to better themselves. They're like, all right, now I got to turn outward. I've now got to go outward and find meaning and purpose beyond myself, and see how I can serve the world in some great way. Right? Great examples here: Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, people that aren't trying to maximize their own potential. Martin Luther King, educated. Mother Teresa comes from a wealthy family. Gandhi, opportunities in life, and chose to focus. These all focus on people that were like, let's go and help others instead of myself in some way. The second theory that you should know is our good friend, Mr. Rogers, Carl Rogers, who much like he looks like a sweet old grandpa, and his theories were very similar to that. It was all about finding your positive self concept. And that we've got all of these different things, right? We've got our understanding of ourselves, we've got how we relate with others, we've got our feelings about ourselves, our self concept, all of these things kind of gearing in towards our self. And so the self-concept of basically our own understanding of ourselves. Who are you? If I ask you the question, who are you? What are your core traits? How do you understand yourself? We likely have some explanation. You'd be able to give me, maybe a decent explanation, maybe not perfect. But Rogers believed that we need to get people to understand their self-concept and develop and get to this positive self-concept. This is when your true self, okay, like who you are, is similar to what you see as your ideal self, right? This can be, to even go back to like cognitive psych, cognitive dissonance. right, is when those things are out of line, right, when they don't mesh up. And then that bothers us. We don't feel good about that. We have a negative self-concept. And oftentimes what people do is they're like, here's my ideal self, here's my real self. And when they match up, I feel good, right? It's like I have these dreams of who I can be, and I'm living like that. And that feels really, really good. There isn't much in life that feels better than that. That's positive self-concept. Like, I am good. I have this belief of who I can be, and I'm doing that. And that's a great thing. Oftentimes what happens, though, much like cognitive dissonance, is that when you have this positive, or you have your understanding of who you are, and then your ideal self is way up here, right? What we end up doing is instead of saying, I'm going to live up to that, we have this negative self-concept. When they don't match up, we're like, I'm not good enough, right? Clearly, I'm not living up to my ideal self. Maybe that's too high of a dream. Let's drop it. Right? We drop our self-concept and we often become less. We drop our self-concept. And this can leads often to very unhappy, dissatisfied people. And so it's kind of like bringing those into equilibrium, right? If somebody's ideal self, they're like, I'm only going to be happy if I become the dictator of the world, right? It's probably not going to happen, and you're going to live a very unhappy life. So it's setting, yes, realistic goals, setting good dreams of your ideal self, of who you'd like to be, but then doing the work to get your real self to that, right? So kind of finding the balance between real self and ideal self, trying to get those to line up so we can have that positive self-concept. And what leads to that is something else from other versions of psychology, things we've talked about, is to go back to developmental psych and authoritative parenting. With no surprise, unconditional positive regard, or parents, peers, teachers, others around us. Often parents are the first to come to mind, but anyone around us that loves and accepts us for who we are, not because of our accomplishments. Right, what we're looking for here is not like this dad in this picture, right? It's like, just remember, son, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, unless you want daddy's love. Right? Like, if we feel like we are only going to be loved and accepted by parents, peers, or teachers if we achieve certain things, then that's going to lead to a very low self-concept. Right? Our low self-esteem, our self-regard is not going to be good. We need that unconditional positive regard. And this works both on the individual level and at the parenting level, right? We can't just by ourselves, right? We can't be like, I'm going to love and accept everyone no matter what, but not give the same thing to ourselves. We have to have ourselves feeling like, even when we make mistakes, say, that's okay. Right? It's okay for me to make mistakes. Understand that other things could cause this problem. I can fix this in the future. This comes back to that like locus of control, balancing that out correctly. Right? Not saying I can control everything and everything is my fault, but saying some things are out of my control. Right? Some things are external, and that's fine. I'm going to do what I can and forget the rest. And then we also have to give the same thing to others. Right? We can't commit that fundamental attribution error. We can't say, clearly they could have fixed that and they didn't. We have to say, it's okay that you failed. Right? I understand. You're my friend no matter what. You're my child no matter what. You're my student no matter what. Right? You made a mistake. I still care about you. Right? I don't think any less of you because of that. I just hope you do better next time. Right? Hope we learned our lesson and we can move on. Right? So, basic pros and cons when it comes to this, and we'll end here. Humanistic approach critique, oftentimes referred to as this is hope and positivity without realism. So the pros of humanistic approach are that, again, this forms the basis of a lot of our positive mainstream psychology today. It's that when people develop this secure self-acceptance, this has been linked and correlated with less defensive attitudes. People who are less likely to be like, I would never act that way. Or it's like, okay, and they're more open, they're empathetic. They score higher on empathy tests. They have higher levels of satisfaction or happiness with their life or contentment, and they have longer lasting, more successful relationships. So having that kind of Carl Rogers secure self-acceptance that only comes through working our way through Maslow's hierarchy of needs leads to these very positive things that most everyone is going to agree are good things. Cons, though, are that it's just all vague, right? It's hard you can't really double blind a humanistic psychology study. Right? There's not going to be any hard evidence behind a lot of this other than the subjectivity of who we look at. Right? Carl Rogers decided, he was like, I'm going to figure out what it takes, what makes a successful person. And so we looked at Abraham Lincoln, and he looked at these great presidents like George Washington and Henry Ford, and looked at all these like great white dudes of the early 1900s and late 1800s, and said, like, clearly I've amassed these like captains of industry and these presidents and successful people, and I found all the things that made them who they were, and here's the things that were similar. Right? That's like, it's too subjective. We can't look at just successful people and take out things like social psychology. We have to take into think biology. So again, once again, we come back to that term that we brought up in just about every single day of psych: biopsychosocial. You can't just approach this humanistic psychology and fix everything, right? We have to also look at what's going on chemically in our brain. Right? Is that something that needs to be addressed first? What's going on within our lives? Social psychology. How are we treated? How is the structure of the where we were born in society, with our family, with our race, ethnicity, sex, gender, like all of these things? How do they play into it? We have to take it all into account. So you can't just use humanistic psychology. And often people will say that it focuses too much on the self-fulfillment of the individual, which can lead to self-indulgence, selfishness, erosion. If we tell people, like, go and do what feels right, find what makes you happy. All right, we're all stuck on self-actualization, and we never worry about self-transcendence, which is then helping others. So Maslow kind of added that at the last minute before he died. A lot of it to respond to this con. And as a biggie, as we've said, it's kind of naive. It appreciates human capacity for evil, and that a lot of times humans can do very nasty things, right? Like, as we talked about in kind of the reciprocal approach to social psychology: hurt people hurt people. That's often true, but there are those that are born in such, like, there are people that are born evil, right? There are elites that are born with some form of or what we would refer to as evil, right? There are those that are born with some form of imbalance, right? Like that are going to cause them to do what people would see as an evil act. And so we can't just say, if we give everyone love and happiness, it'll cure all the world's problems. It can cure a lot of them, but it can't fix everything. Right. So we have to approach all things with that biopsychosocial approach and not just it. So we will call it a day there. I'll have Tim